Good afternoon and a warm Hawkeye welcome on a rather warm day here in Iowa City in that time of transition between the seasons and everything that we experience this time of year, but to my pleasure to welcome you to the Alumni Fellows event for 2013 and to welcome our distinguished class of 2013 Alumni Fellows. For those that may not know, my name is Vince Nelson, and I have the privilege and honor of serving as the president of the University of Iowa Alumni Association. And as I have said to each of the ones who have come back to campus, this is one of the greatest days for an alumni association and for a director or anyone that's involved in this work, is to come back and recognize the great achievements of our alumni. Others have heard me say before that, the alumni of an institution is the one constant. And they are the one group that never leaves. Faculty come and go, staff come and go, students matriculate and become alumni, but they are always tied to that institution. And when we have an opportunity to celebrate the achievements and accomplishments of our alumni, we celebrate that over and over. I want to give you a little history of how this came about. Back in the early to mid-'80s, a campaign was started at the University of Iowa called the IE 2000 campaign, and it was started to raise endowment monies for the institution, for endowed chairs, endowed professorships. And along the way, the Alumni Association committed to funding a chair in the College of Liberal Arts. That's how it got started. In 1998, that pledge and gift came to fruition, and we were able to begin to move forward with the naming of the chair. A suggestion by the provost at the time and the president said, how about if we would name the chair but for the dean of the college? We didn't have a dean's chair. And others thought that was a good idea, so we have funded the dean's chair since 1998. Linda Maxson, who is in the audience, is the one that held it for the first time. And Linda, it's nice to see you and have you back with us today. But along with the funds from the earnings of that gift, there were also some other monies that could be used for other programs. And Linda developed the program for Alumni Fellows, where we could recognize alumni tied to, from the standpoint of our gift to the College of Liberal Arts and Science. So that's how it got started. And I believe the first one, Linda, was in 99, 2000, around in there, I think, when we inaugurated it. So again, it's a great day to have you back and to celebrate the gifts and talents that you have shared with so many over the years. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank two people specifically who played a key role in this today and to bring this to fruition kind of with a different format. And that is Nick Harp, Director of External Relations for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and collaborating with Whit France Kelly, our Assistant Director of Programs at the Alumni Association, for we have combined kind of one of our lifelong learning programs that we offer throughout the year, along with the Alumni Fellows this year to kick this season off. So I think Whit is back out in the room, but I thank both of you for that. It is my pleasure at this particular point now to introduce to you and ask to come to the podium the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, who holds the Alumni Association chair in the college. Please welcome Dean Shadin Dajali. Shadin?
Thank you, Vince, and welcome to all of you who have joined us today for the 2013 College of Liberal Arts and Sciences Alumni Fellow Celebration. As you heard from Vince, this is the 15th year that our college has named Alumni Fellows from among its almost 150,000 alumni around Iowa and the world. This wonderful program, which allows the college and its departments to celebrate especially significant contribution to society, the professions, the college, and University of Iowa, was begun in 1999 by Dean Emerita Linda Maxson. Linda is with us today, and I'd like to ask her to stand and be recognized. Thank you, Linda, for your own innumerable and ongoing contribution to our college and university. I'd also like to thank the UI Alumni Association for endowing the deanship that both Linda and I have had the privilege to hold. the UI Alumni Association Dean's Chair in the Liberal Arts and Sciences. The funds made available each year by the chair make the Alumni Fellows program possible. And finally, I'd like to thank Joan Kerr, who will host our panel discussion immediately following the awards portion of our celebration today. Joan is host of the public radio and television program World Canvas, presented throughout each academic year by UI International Programs. Before I introduce the fellows, I would like to encourage all of you to note in your program the public lectures the fellows are offering to our campus and community. If you are able to attend one or more, please do. They will be fascinating. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our 2013 Alumni Fellows and ask each to say a few words. Fellows, as I announce your name, please come forward to the podium. Rick Cleveland came to Iowa as an Iowa Arts Fellow and graduated from the Department of Theater Arts with an MFA degree in playwriting in 1995. He has a successful and flourishing career in television and film. As a writer for the West Wing television series, he won the 2000 Emmy Award for Best Writing for a Drama Series, and is currently a co-producer and writer for the series House of Cards, which is nominated for the 2013 Emmy Award for Outstanding Drama Series this Sunday. Good luck. Mr. Cleveland has also been a writer and/or producer for the series 6 Feet Under, Nurse Jackie, and Mad Men. He co-wrote the film Runaway Jury, and he won the Jury Award for Best One-Person Show at the 2006 U.S. Comedy Arts Festival. Congratulations.
Thank you. About once or twice a year, I have a dream, usually when I'm under a fair amount of stress, and I get a phone call from somebody at the University of Iowa, and they tell me that they need me to give them my MFA back. And when I ask why, they say, there's a problem with your transcripts from the 6th grade. If there's any psychiatrists in the audience, maybe we can talk about this afterwards. Sometimes when I tell people that I'm a TV writer, I feel like I'm at the bottom of the food chain of writers. But when I tell people that I attended the University of Iowa, I don't feel at all like I'm at the bottom of the food chain of colleges and universities. And looking back on everything that I have in my life, I'm reminded that coming to the University of Iowa was one of the first smart things, and maybe the smartest thing I ever did. So thank you.
John Falsey, who graduated from the Iowa Writers' Workshop with an MFA degree in 1978, is an award-winning and influential television writer and producer. He has been nominated for 11 Emmy Awards and won 3. Outstanding Miniseries in 1987 for A Year in the Life. Outstanding Drama in 1992 for Northern Exposure. And Outstanding Dramatic Writing in 1992 for I'll Fly Away. Mr. Falsey has won numerous other prestigious awards, and in 1992, he was awarded in Newsweek as one of the 100 cultural elite in America. In February of this year, he won the Paddy Chayefsky Laurel Award for Television, which is the Writers Guild of America's Lifetime Achievement Honors. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's been 35 years since I've been back here in Iowa City, and how it's grown. I'm just so pleased to have been asked back and to what Rick was saying, one of my proudest moments and achievements was graduating from the Writers' Workshop in Iowa. It was from the workshop that I wrote the short story, in the workshop that I wrote the short story that was published while a student in the New Yorker magazine that really changed my life. I would disagree with Rick only on one point. Writing television, especially these days, is in no way at the bottom of the food chain. With the explosion of all the pay cable television, we no longer have to sit at the small table when it comes to fiction writing. You have short stories, you have, of course, the novel, but screenplay writing, whether for television or features, in my case, I'll be concentrating tomorrow on the television aspect, is a form where you can write, where serious fiction writers can write, be proud of what they've done. Their work will be seen by millions of people. And as a father of a 25 and a 21-year-old, you can also make a living, raise children with it. And anyway, I'll talk more about that tomorrow around this time, but I'm just so pleased and honored to be back here. Thank you.
Simone Ferro, who earned an MFA from the Department of Dance in 2000, came to Iowa having performed as soloist for such prestigious dance companies as Ballet da Cidade de São Paulo, Ballet do Teatro Municipal do Rio de Janeiro, and Ballet du Grand Théâtre de Genève. Ms. Ferro joined the faculty of University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 2001, where she's chair and professor of the Department of Dance in the Peck School of the Arts. She travels regularly to Brazil to document and research the traditional Bumba Meu Boi folk festivities in the northeastern state of Maranhão, resulting in choreographed works and a unique research repository of dozens of video clips of traditional Bumba Meu Boi. Congratulations.
Good afternoon. I'm honored and humbled by this award. I am honored to be sharing this stage with these prestigious laureates and highly achieved professionals. Congratulations, gentlemen. As you can see, I cannot deny my roots nor my field. A dancer is always a dancer, and a Brazilian is always a Brazilian. Anywhere we go, it's in our genes. Dancers are nomads. We are citizens of places, not flags, not languages, but beliefs. The world is indeed the stage. Space and place have very different meaning and shape. We embody the world in which we live, and we respond to it through metaphors, questions, and more questions. We treasure form, rigor, chaos, humanity, and of course, success. We devour practice, adore sweat, and believe in contemplation. We are perfectionists. We prefer challenges because we are problem solvers. We cherish narrow private spaces and use creativity to serve the world. When I first landed in Cedar Rapids in 1998, little I knew about the wonders I would find in Iowa. The night before, when I boarded the 747 that brought me from Geneva to Chicago, I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I doing? My application to the graduate school was totally intuitive. I filled endless forms, each one more complicated than other, with an average of understanding of 50% of its content. For the second time of my life, I was changing continents, following my heart's desire, with no reservations, nor fears, but hope. What follows is history. I landed in Halsey Hall every morning with exception of Sundays, not because of the Sabbath, but because it was study day. After being a professional for 20 years, I found myself with young people who were just born about the time I started dancing professionally. They were aspiring to gain proficiency and mastery, while I obsessively look into myself in search for a better artist and teacher. I found grace and generosity between those walls. I found beauty in Alicia Brown's words of wisdom, comfort in Ellen Shadima's smile, mystery in David Burke's sense of humor. My friends become the reason for me to wake up every morning, ride my bike downhill next to the old Capitol, and breathe the wealth of my predecessors. Alan Senior taught me that everything is relative, while my friend Armando taught me that everything is absolute. I worked with Hans Britter, with whom I learned that anything is possible if you have the will to dare. Days passed in Dodge Street while I learned that climatic manifestations in the Midwest are for real. Black ice, freezing rain, heat advisory, this last one always present in Halsey Halls, which made our summers unbearable even by Brazilian standards. Iowa City became home, and the United States became the place for me to share what I have learned. I do not know if I ever really dare to the extreme. What I know is that I have learned that the teacher that I was when I first came here was very different than the educator and the compassionate human being that the University of Iowa helped me to become. Thank you.
Howard Kerr earned a bachelor's degree in political science in 1960. An Iowa native, Mr. Kerr served as commanding officer of U.S. Navy destroyers and as a commander of U.S. Navy Destroyer Squadron 33. He earned Master's of Arts degree in law and diplomacy from the Fletcher School of Law and in diplomacy from Tufts University. Mr. Kerr served as a military aide to Vice President Agnew and Ford, as a naval aide and deputy presidential counselor to President Ford, and as a military fellow on the Council on Foreign Relations. Upon leaving the military, he developed a successful private sector career, becoming president and CEO of Custom Technologies Corporation, Grabill Aerospace Industries Limited, and Pocklington Financial Corporation. He also served as mayor of Lake Forest in Illinois. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much, Dean, and special thanks to my, my friends and colleagues in the Department of Political Science, and to all of you, once again, congratulations. I was born and raised on the east side of Des Moines, Iowa in the late 1930s and 1940s. Someone once described our neighborhood as occupied or populated by the flotsam and jetsam of the Great Depression. I never knew anybody growing up who had gone to college. Most of the people, including my parents, never got beyond the 9th or 10th grade. When people went to work, they carried a lunch bucket and they punched a time card. That's what my father did. That's what my older brother did. and that's what I was doing. Until one morning, I didn't go to work. I went to the intersection of Highway 6 in Des Moines, and I hitchhiked to Iowa City. And I got out here and I registered at the university for the fall term, took a room on Melrose Avenue, and got a job, a board job at the hospital, scrubbing pots and pans for 60 cents an hour. But it wasn't long before I was studying the Greeks and the Bible. I took a course in physics under Professor James Van Allen. I studied Catholic religion, philosophy, history. I spent one summer reading the 6 volumes of Churchill's Second World War for a professor in the history department. And I remember the tremendous difficulty I had understanding William Faulkner and those marvelous characters in a Dostoevsky novel. Really, what I'm trying to say here is that this university, this college, became my window to the world. 4 years ago, I was invited back to give a lecture in the political science department on the final days of Watergate and the transition between President Nixon and President Ford. And when I finished, this young lady came up to me and she said, "You have been so fortunate and so lucky to be a part of this history and to see it firsthand." And I said, an early mentor of mine in the Navy told me that luck was preparation waiting for opportunity. My preparation began right here. And I could thank a lot of people, but I want to take this opportunity to thank the people of Iowa who supported this university. It was then called the State University of Iowa. And through their support, I was able to come here. This university was accessible and affordable. And I thank everyone very much.
Stamatios Tom Kremigis earned his doctoral degree in 1965 under the supervision of James Van Allen. Briefly served on the UI faculty and then began a lifelong career at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory. He has been involved with instruments that have flown to 8 planets, acting as a principal investigator or co-investigator for 21 instruments on space missions, including the Cassini, Voyager, and Explorer missions. Dr. Kremigis has authored more than 500 scientific papers, book chapters, and conference proceedings. In addition to having an asteroid named after him, 8323 Kremigis, he has won dozens of prestigious awards, including 2 NASA medals for exceptional scientific achievement and the Smithsonian Institution Trophy. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. In sitting here and listening to the short bios and the accomplishments of the fellow alumni awardees here, I've never won any or even nominated for any Emmy Awards or being a star international dancer or presidential advisor. And I was thinking of a piece of advice that I received from a respected colleague at the beginning of my career saying, you have to prepare yourself to be lucky And I said, well, luck is luck. I mean, what does that have to do with preparation? I found out from my colleague next to me that he said something very similar. And he meant to be prepared for a time when luck is going to run into you. And in my case, I was an undergraduate student at the University of Minnesota working on an instrument when Professor Van Allen came to the university a few years after the discovery of the Van Allen belts and stopped by my bench and asked me what I was doing. And I tried to explain to the best I could what I was doing, which was a sensor that we flew up on balloons, and he asked me how it worked. So I did, and then he said, well, have you thought about graduate school? I say, yeah, but I really don't have any money to go to graduate school. He says, well, why don't you apply to Iowa? So I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. I'll do that. And so that was my introduction to the wonderful opportunity of being at the right time, at the right place, at the right time, doing the right thing, and being lucky in running into a person of the magnitude and stardom of James Van Allen. I learned a lot in the process. I also came to appreciate the fairness and the integrity and sense of goodness of the people of Iowa, and I'll tell you why. Because at the time I was a graduate student, there was a gubernatorial race between Harold Hughes, who then became a U.S. Senator, and Norman Irby, if I remember correctly, who was running for election as governor. And in one of their debates, Mr. Irby said, oh, well, you're a former alcoholic, why do you want to be governor? Mr. Hughes was fairly far behind in the polls. After that, he leapt forward and won the governorship. And I said to myself, here is a people who have all the qualities of fair-mindedness and integrity and high spirits. And ever since, when my friends and colleagues, both American and non-Americans, talk about values and American values, I say, well, if you really want to know about American values, go and live in Iowa for a few years. I'm very grateful to all. Thank you very much.
Louis Lipsett, Professor Emeritus of Psychology, Human Development, and Medical Science at Brown University, earned his PhD in psychology in 1957. He is recognized as a pioneer in the field of child psychology. Dr. Lipsett's discoveries laid the bedrock for much of what we know today about early language and cognitive development. Among many awards and honors, he was a Guggenheim Fellow and received the Nicholas Hobbs Award for Science in the Service of Children in 1990 from the American Psychological Association. Dr. Lipsett also won the American Association for the Advancement of Science Lifetime Achievement Mentor Award for helping women and minorities in the pursuit of scientific careers. And in 2012, he was given the Vincent DeFrancis Award from the American Humane Association. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I wish to thank especially the University of Iowa, the University of Iowa Alumni Association, and my colleagues in the Department of Psychology, which have all chosen to recognize me with this very special honor, which I'm not sure that I deserve. After hearing so much here today from my colleagues about opportunities and luck, I have to remind you that fortuitous factors in human development are extremely important. They come along and they push us one way or another, sometimes not in such good ways. And I think that the talent of people who succeed is often that of helping push the negative aspects of our development away from us. With regard to fortuitous factors, let's remember that we don't select our parents, and we become subject to many experiential conditions in our lives which condition what goes on later in our lives. I'm speaking as a child developmentalist, of course. I've been studying longitudinally the behavior of children from the first day that they are born up until now. Many of our people in our study are almost 50 years old, almost as old as I am. And we're still learning from them. There is much to be learned by looking at the specific factors in people's lives that push them along. In any event, I want to say that when I got my degree, my PhD, at the University of Iowa, one of the people that was on my committee was Professor Kenneth Spence, the famous experimental psychologist. And as I walked out of the room where they had just declared that I was worthy of the PhD, he said to me, "Lipset, don't forget that we can take your degree back for 7 years." I had never heard that before, and I haven't heard of it since. In any event, I've not heard from him since then. And so I presume that I'm worthy of at least that PhD, and now to hear that I'm worthy of this particular honor from the University of Iowa among such a distinguished group of people, I'm overwhelmed with delight. My father thanks you, my mother thanks you, and I thank you.
Let me assure all our fellows we're not taking anything away. Paul Etkin, who received his bachelor's degree in philosophy in 1988, is a judge on the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. He was nominated to the seat by President Obama and received his commission in July 2011. Judge Etkin earned his law degree from Yale Law School and went on to clerk for 2 federal judges and for Justice Harry Blackmun of the U.S. Supreme Court. He served as an attorney in the Office of Legal Counsel in the U.S. Department of Justice, as an associate counsel in the Office of Counsel to the President. Before assuming his current judgeship, he was with Cablevision Systems Corporation as Associate General Counsel and Senior Vice President. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for this honor. It's a particular honor to be in this group of distinguished people. Unlike apparently everyone else, I've received no Emmys. I've never commanded a Navy vessel, and I don't have any asteroids named after me so far. But I'm going to talk to Dr. Kremides after the reception about some asteroids in the future. And I'm beginning psychotherapy with Dr. Lipset tomorrow. 25 years ago, I graduated from the university with a bachelor's in philosophy. And 2 years ago today, I was sworn in as a federal judge in New York. And in between, I've had lots of surprises and unexpected developments in my career. I was one of those people who didn't quite know what I was going to do. I ended up sort of going back and forth between government and the private sector as a lawyer, had the opportunity to work on the Supreme Court and in the Clinton administration, and then ultimately become a judge, which was like a dream come true, but which sort of came out of the blue. In all of those things, and even in the way the transitions among those different things happened, the education I received from the University of Iowa in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which used to be called the College of Liberal Arts, but they finally gave science its due, and in the philosophy department in particular, were really crucial to every step of my career. The foundation in the education that I got at the university really made a huge difference for me. And I think of it as two things. I think of it as the College of Liberal Arts giving me the sort of breadth of a liberal arts education, and the philosophy department giving me the depth of clear analytical thinking, which has stayed with me in every job, and in particular in my job as a judge, the kind of precise analytical thinking, the getting rid of ambiguities, the taking apart of a problem in a very clear way is something that I think about all the time. I think about specific things I learned in my philosophy classes. So I owe a huge debt to the university, to the college, and to my department, my professors from the philosophy department. And I want to thank the Alumni Association and the college and the philosophy department.
Congratulations again to each of our fellows. You're truly an inspiration. On behalf of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, thank you so much. Now, please stay with us as we move to the panel discussion part of today's celebration, which will begin right away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joan Kerr, and we want to welcome you to this wonderful event this afternoon, where we're honoring the 2013 College of Liberal Arts and Sciences Alumni Fellows. Thank you for being with us. We're in the Senate Chamber of the Old Capitol Museum here on the campus of the University of Iowa, and have a nice crowd who've come to share some thoughts with all of you who have graduated from our university with one degree or another and have gone on to really remarkable careers. So as we get going here, I would like to do an initial introduction of everyone, and then we'll just have a general conversation. So just immediately to my left is Rick Cleveland. Very nice to have you here, Rick. You got your Master's of Fine Arts in 1995 in Theater Arts here at Iowa, and you have had a very successful career, continues to be a flourishing career in television and film. As a writer for the West Wing television series, Rick won the 2000 Emmy Award for Best Writing for a Drama Series, and he's currently co-producer and writer for the series House of Cards, which I know many of us have been watching and are waiting for the next season. You've been nominated for the 2013 Emmy Award for Outstanding Drama Series, and you have also been a writer, producer for programs like 6 Feet Under, Nurse Jackie, and Mad Men. So this is Rick Cleveland from Theater Arts. Next to him is John Falsey, Master of Fine Arts here at Iowa in 1978 from the Iowa Writers Workshop. John Falsey is an award-winning and influential television writer and producer, and he has been nominated for 11 Emmys, has won 3, including Outstanding Miniseries for A Year in the Life, Outstanding Drama for Northern Exposure, and Outstanding Dramatic Writing for I'll Fly Away. John Falsey has won numerous other prestigious awards. In 1992, he was featured in Newsweek as one of the 100 cultural elite in America. In February of this year, he won the Patty Chayefsky Laurel Award for Television from the Writers Guild of America's the Writers Guild of America's Lifetime Achievement Honor. So thank you for being with us, John. Simone Ferro is next to John Falsey, and she received her Master of Fine Arts degree at the University of Iowa in 2000 in dance. And Simone Ferro came to Iowa having performed internationally as a soloist for a number of prestigious organizations, dance companies in Brazil, Switzerland, and elsewhere. After earning her MFA, Ferro joined the faculty of the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, and she is currently chair and professor of the Department of Dance in the Peck School of the Arts. She travels regularly to Brazil to document and research traditional folk festivities in the northeastern state of Maranhão. I'll have to ask you to help me pronounce it. Great. Resulting in choreographed works and unique research repertory of dozens of video clips of traditional dance forms. So welcome, Simone. And then next to Simone Ferro is Mr. Howard Kerr. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Kerr. You are an Iowa City, or an Iowa native. I understand that you were born in Des Moines, raised in Des Moines, and you served as commanding officer of U.S. Navy destroyers and as commander of Destroyer Squadron 33. You earned a Master's of Arts in Law and Diplomacy from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. And Mr. Kerr served as military aide to Vice Presidents Agnew and Ford, and as a naval aide and deputy presidential counselor to President Ford, also as a military fellow in the Council on Foreign Relations. After leaving the military, Mr. Kerr successfully worked in the private sector, was president and CEO of Custom Technologies Corporation, of Graybill Aerospace Industries Limited, and Pocklington Financial Corporation. And Mr. Kerr has also served as mayor of Lake Forest, Illinois. So pleasure to have you here. Next to him is Stamatios or Tom Krmingas, Master of Science in 1963 from the University of Iowa, followed by a PhD in 1965 in physics and astronomy. Tom Krmingas earned his doctoral degree under the supervision of James Van Allen, briefly served on the U of I faculty, and then began a lifelong career at Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory. Dr. Krmingas has been involved with instruments that have flown to 8 planets, acting as a principal investigator or co-investigator for 21 instruments on space missions, including the Cassini, the Voyager, that we've been hearing so much about recently, and Explorer missions. Krmingas has authored more than 500 scientific papers and book chapters and conference proceedings, and he also has an asteroid named after him, 8323 Krmingas. He's won dozens of prestigious awards, including 2 NASA medals for exceptional scientific achievement and the Smithsonian Institution Trophy. So thank you for being here, Dr. Krmingas. Next to him is Louis Lipset, PhD here at the University of Iowa in 1957 in psychology. And Louis Lipset is Professor Emeritus of Psychology, Human Development, and Medical Science at Brown University. Dr. Lipset is a pioneer in the field of child psychology. His discoveries laid the bedrock for much of what we know today about early language and cognitive development. Among many awards and honors, he was a Guggenheim Fellow and has received the Nicholas Hobbs Award for Science in the Service of Children from the American Psychological Association. Lipset has also won the American Association for the Advancement of Science Lifetime Achievement Mentor Award for helping women and minorities in the pursuit of scientific careers. In 2012, he was given the Vincent DeFrancis Award from the American Humane Association. Welcome. And at the far end, we have J. Paul Etkin, Bachelor of Arts here at the University of Iowa in 1988 in philosophy. Paul Etkin is a judge on the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. He was nominated to the seat by President Obama and received his commission in July of 2011. Etkin earned a degree from Yale Law School and went on to clerk for 2 federal judges and for Justice Harry Blackmun of the U.S. Supreme Court. He served as an attorney in the Office of Legal Counsel in the U.S. Department of Justice and as associate counsel in the Office of Counsel to the President. Before assuming his current judgeship, he was with Cablevision Systems Corporation as associate general counsel and senior vice president. So that is our group of 2013 Alumni Fellows. Please give them a warm hand. So we would like today to have a chance to talk a little bit about the value of a liberal arts education and what your experience here at the University of Iowa, whether as an undergraduate or a graduate student, has meant to your later career, your development as a person, of course, but also your professional opportunities, the things you've decided to do, the things you've decided, oh, I'm not so interested in that. What has it meant to you, really, to be at this institution? And I want to start first with Mr. Kerr and also with Paul Etkin, because you are both undergrads here. You both got your BAs at the University of Iowa. Could I throw the question first to you, Mr. Kerr?
Well, I like to think that the most important thing I learned at Iowa was how to construct a coherent sentence and paragraph. I found out that the ability to write, express myself, was extraordinarily important, and no matter where I was, but I ended up in some jobs where it was particularly important to be able to express what other people were thinking and saying. And I look back here, and I left here with that skill set, I believe, and I was able to improve it, hone it, and it was very valuable to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You spoke a little bit earlier about the modest upbringing you had, that you had not known anyone in your circle, certainly no one in your family who'd gone to college before.
Yeah.
And so this was, in many ways, a very, very new world to you.
Well, as I said, I came here with, I didn't have high expectations, but I wanted to experience something that I figured would be. I wanted to go on. I wanted to move out of where I was, and I wanted a different life. That wasn't unusual, I don't believe. And Iowa gave me that opportunity. As I said, this experience became my window to the world. And as I defined luck, as someone once said I was lucky, I said luck was defined as preparation waiting for opportunity. And when I look back, the foundation of that opportunity, or the foundation of that what gave me that, was my time here as an undergraduate at the University of Iowa.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Paul, what would you say Iowa did for you as you came in as this young guy, obviously with big ideas, big dreams? Maybe you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do when you were done, but you came here and started college. What did you think you would get out of it?
You know, I wasn't really thinking in terms of career at all. I just wasn't focused on it. In fact, I remember when I told my dad at one point that I was majoring in philosophy, he called it pre-unemployment. And, you know, I figured one way or another I'd either go to, I had thought about law school. I thought, you know, I'll either go to graduate school. I sort of always had the idea of teaching in the back of my mind. I thought maybe I would, you know, pursue philosophy all the way and end up, you know, doing it as an academic career. Or if I didn't, I figured I'd go to some other graduate school or something else. So I really was getting a liberal arts education without thinking much, really kind of stupidly, about what would be next, you know, what jobs. I was just enjoying learning. And, you know, when it came to the end, it was kind of either go to grad school in philosophy or law school. And I felt like Yale Law School was a compromise because it was supposed to be like this really theoretical law school. They had a saying when I visited there: anything you can do, we can do meta. Meaning that, you know, they look at the theoretical side of the law. So I thought, oh, that's kind of like a little bit of both. So, yeah. But as I said before, the education I got here really was tremendous, both in terms of, you know, the GER, the general education requirements. I took everything from astronomy to French to, you know, history classes that were incredible. Just such a great mix of different kinds of classes. And then in my philosophy major itself, really learning, kind of like what Howard said, to think and to write with precision and with clarity.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so for all the rest of you, I'd love to get a response on what some of you had teaching positions here, as well as positions where you, the student occupation. But I actually don't know how many of you had graduate assistantships, but I do know that you, Dr. Kremigas, taught here for a little while before you went on to Johns Hopkins. But Rick, let me just turn to you and ask you a little bit. Coming here, obviously you're entering into a graduate program in theater arts. You'd already chosen your field. You knew what you wanted to be doing. But nonetheless, you came to a big, big campus where there are, you know, thousands of students and teachers doing lots of different things. Why was that the right environment for you, do you think?
Well, when I was in high school in the late 70s, I in a suburb of Cleveland, I had a lot of teachers who were at Kent State. and they were there as students the day Governor Jim Rhodes told the National Guard to open fire on the Vietnam War protesters. And it's kind of hard to imagine now, but there were a lot of literature classes that I took. There was an Alvin Toffler class, Future Shock. There was a science fiction literature class, and there was a class called Literature of Social Criticism. And we read Abby Hoffman's Steal This Book, and Johnny Got His Gun, and Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. And in the early pages of Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut talked about being at the University of Iowa teaching here, and even at 15, I dog-eared that page, and I thought, I'm going to go to the University of Iowa and be taught by Kurt Vonnegut. And that didn't quite work out. Well, Kurt Vonnegut ended up, it's weird because Seven Hills, the school district next to us, banned Slaughterhouse-Five, and Kurt Vonnegut traveled to Ohio and tried to talk the school board into reversing their decision. And so our teacher took our whole class to that Board of Education meeting, and hearing Kurt Vonnegut speak so eloquently, that just made me, want to be a writer even more.
Yeah.
So, I can't say that I was always focused on getting here one way or another, but eventually I got offered a fellowship to join the Playwrights Workshop, and I was so proud of being here and so nervous about maybe being asked to leave or flunking out that I really wanted a Hawkeyes jersey, but I wouldn't allow myself to get one until I had actually graduated. And that was the last thing I bought before I got in my U-Haul truck and drove out to Los Angeles.
Yeah. Well, just connecting here with John next to you, who's also working in film and television and went through the Writers' Workshop and whatnot. You certainly knew about the Writers' Workshop before you applied and knew about its long history and so on. Nonetheless, why did you decide to come here?
I was just trying to think about, while Rick was talking, exactly when it was that I became aware of the Writers' Workshop, the fact that it was worldwide considered the finest fiction writing workshop in the world. I don't remember how many students are admitted a year. I think it's like 15 or something, or very, very small. I had written my first, I went to Boston College for 2 years and then transferred to Hampshire College and began to write short stories then. It was a natural progression. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the writing. I just knew that I wanted to write. I had a lot of resistance at home because my father was a lawyer. As I said, his son went Harvard Business School, Michigan Law School, and he really couldn't wrap his head around the fact that you want to do what, and that people would actually pay for something that you wrote. So it was really through, I drove out across the country with a girlfriend of mine at the time, settled in Laguna Beach, California. This was in 1975, 76. And I was the circulation manager on the Laguna Beach News Post when she called me and said I had applied for September admission to the Writers' Workshop in 1976, and she called me up at work and she said, well, the letter came, it was in March. And I said, great, open it up. She said, well, it's thin. And I didn't get in. And it was only, I must say, it was Candace Lowe. She cried crocodile tears. I can really see it. When I got home, and that Tuesday and that Wednesday, it's too long of a story to go into, but one of your guest professors, Henry Bromell, was teaching at the time and was also a contributing editor at a quarterly in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and an editor. I'd sent a short story of mine there, and the editor was so impressed with the short stories, he called me and he said, well, what do you want to do with your life? I was 22 or 23. I said, well, I'm going to apply to the Writers' Workshop. He said, well, Henry Bromell is a guest professor out there. There won't be any problem. He'll read your short stories and you'll be in, which is why when the letter came, I was so certain. Anyway, my girlfriend kept it up for 2 full days. She said, you have to find out if Henry Bromell, I really owe her enormously because I'm not the kind of person who normally would do it. You don't cry over spilled milk, that was the, but she wouldn't let it go. Tuesday and Wednesday, it was unbearable. So she said, she dialed, and I don't know if Connie Brothers is still in the room, but I called Thursday morning, the last week in March 1976. 2-hour time difference. It was about 1 o'clock here, and Connie Brothers, who has worked a fixture at the workshop, answered the phone. It was the lunch break. And she said, well, I said, my name is John Falsey, and I kid you not, Candy was this close, staring and listening. And I said, I didn't get in. And she said, well, it's the lunch break. The office is closed up. I'm having a sandwich at the desk. Would you mind? And I said, no. I said, well, anyway, I'm just calling. I didn't get in. And before she could say, well, that's too bad, I said, listen, I'm not one to cry over spilt milk. And then I looked up and saw those huge blue eyes. And she was really boring in, so I said it. Did Henry Bromell read the short stories? And you could feel Connie's body go from back here to this. And to make a long story short, I'll wrap it up. She said, send them all back, the short stories back, the 6 stories. And Henry did read them, and it was through him that, that I got in. And it really did, I must say, it changed my, being a student at the Writers' Workshop, I went in obviously incredibly insecure. I hadn't been admitted. I later found out that it was the second-year students who read the stuff to get you in and out. But the first story that I put up in the workshop was bought by the New Yorker magazine while I was a student and published, and it really did change my life. I would just say that the Writers' Workshop was very nurturing. I owe a tremendous amount to Elizabeth Cullinan, who was a guest professor that second year, 1977, when the New Yorker called me. Is today September 20th? I believe it is, tomorrow. Yeah. September 20th, 1977, I was living over on Dodge. 9 o'clock in the morning, and the phone call came in from Charles McGrath at the New Yorker, saying that they had read and wanted to buy my short story. And that really did change everything. So I owe an awful lot to, and Elizabeth had the same editor, the guest professor, the same editor there at the New Yorker, and it really just changed everything. Those 2 years were nurturing. It was a port in the storm where all you really had to worry about was, you know, a roof under your head, over your head, wasn't expensive, and eating, and then you had all the time in the world to find out over that 2-year period if you had what it took to seriously consider writing for a living. So I'm in great debt to the university.
No, that's great. But at the time, you were not really thinking about writing for television.
I wasn't. As a matter of fact, I was 40 pages into a novel. The short story came out, was published in the first week in January 1978. I was graduating in May. And there had been talk, because I had sent a second story immediately. They wanted another one very quickly. And as Charles McGrath said to me over Christmas, it didn't get bought, but by a 3-2 vote. 3 of them, the fiction editors, voted not to do it, but 2 had. And he kept saying that to me, you know, we want you to continue with your novel. There was talk about the magazine helping me. So as I said, I was 40 pages into a novel in February when I got another phone call, this time from a producer who had read the short story in the New Yorker, liked it, and said, well, you're graduating. I guess you're graduating in the spring. What do you want to do with yourself? And I wasn't certain, even with the short story, I just didn't know about New York. And he was very encouraging. He said, well, the writer's workshop is held in very high esteem out here. This was television writing and feature writing. And he optioned my short story. And with that money, I stood in my apartment in Dodge, figured out where I thought the East Coast was and the West Coast, and decided to go out there, and then things happened very quickly for me. But the writer's workshop did, and that short story did get me in, and I had my own show, I think, within 2 years.
Wow, terrific, terrific. Well, while we stay with writing for just a minute, Rick, I know that you come back and you have taught many workshops and courses and whatnot here when you can in theater arts and talk to students. And do you still feel in some way like you're one of those kids in the classroom? Like what's going to come next?
Yeah, and I mean, every time I get a job on a new series, I'm now sort of, I guess I'm the old guy in the room a lot of times, and I still feel like as nervous as I did my first day on my first job. But I noticed, like I came out here for 2 years ago to a playwrights festival, and there was one playwright that really bugged me. She sort of followed me around, and she said she wanted to come out to LA, and could I help her? And so I made a few phone calls and got her some meetings with assistants of my agent and around town, and she wanted me to have coffee with her, and so I went down to Century City and had coffee with her and her mother, and her mother was my age, and that really threw me off. I'm used to having coffee with girls, but I'm not their mother's age. Yeah. So that still sort of rattles around in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me just go down the line a little bit. Simone, you indicated in a talk you gave a little bit earlier that you came here to get your Master's of Fine Arts after having a professional career for many years and traveling around the world and so on, but then deciding that you wanted to come and go further with dance and choreography and whatnot. Why Iowa? Why did you come to this school?
Well, I have a very dear friend that is a professor in the dance department, Armando Duarte. And I was living in Switzerland, was managing a dance company, when he called and said, why you don't go back to school? And I was arriving in a crossroads in my career, and it seemed appropriate. And I frankly, and I apologize, I did not know where Iowa was in the map. In fact, I had to correct my parents several times because they would say Iowa and Idaho, and they could do everything but Iowa. And so the fact of trusting this friend, and he said, you are going to have a very eclectic career. And I was performing, not choreographing very much, so I did a TOEFL, so every international student must pass the TOEFL, and had reading deficiency, and had to do some reading classes. And what did we read? To Kill a Mockingbird, which was very interesting because the contractions, I did not know about the contractions, so the TA that was teaching that class was from Asia. So between our universes was very interesting to find a common language to approach American literature through these two individuals that have a language in common that might be deciphered or not at the times. But
at that point, I had been a global citizen. I understood, but traveling to America made the difference because I was embarking on a third language in my roster of speaking languages, and understanding a culture that is highly influences Brazil. I being able to, at that point, we did not have the performing arts division, and Alan knows that. My thesis, I had a 25 musician band on the stage. And having the opportunity to have Alan Senior, and I don't know if Dean Madison remember, I went to her office to ask for money to produce my thesis. And she gave me money. And I had two professors dancing for me on the stage, one with a band of 20, 25 musicians, and fully supported by the department. I mean, when could I find something like this? And the fact of collaboration, I mean, I always loved to collaborate. I always cherished interdisciplinarity. And here, I mean, Hans Brider, that is now deceased, invited me to participate on one of his collaborations. And it was the first time that I got acquainted with multimedia, cameras, digesting and actually processing the images live and projecting. And I had very specific, there was no improvisation at that point, but highly produced. And he cherished so much what I brought into this process, where I was the one learning and coming from a very different field. I have this ballet background, but did a lot of contemporary dance, and finding someone that would ask me, okay, you're going to improvise for 35 seconds, you need to have one foot in the X, and the head needs to go facing this direction. And so having the opportunity to interact with artists like this, and still develop a career. I mean, I was in the room taking classes, as I mentioned, with 20-year-olds, and I was twice that age at that time. And the respect that I had for my colleagues, I mean, I was in the room, and they treat me they treat me as a colleague to them. And I think that experience you translate and bring to your own teaching. I discovered kinesiology. Charlotte Adams taught me how to see my body as a science, as a scientific miracle. And I did not know that my back was hurting, but I did not know why. And after that class, I could. And today, I apply those textbooks, actually, by Charlotte, in my classes. Yeah. And so I think that the well-rounded, this vision that is permanent, it dominates, and this plurality that of education that the university gives is definitely to the asset of its students.
And may I ask you one more question related to your teaching? When you were here at Iowa working with these younger students, and now in Wisconsin where you teach, I imagine that many of the students who are in your dance classes are not dance majors. They're interested in dance and they're serious about their dance, but they're not necessarily looking to go on to a professional career. They might be in pre-med or something. So how is that, rather than being in if you were teaching in a highly focused training environment rather than a liberal arts and sciences environment, what would be the differences, do you think?
I think that this is twofold. When I teach majors, I'm conveying the profession. I know that my BFAs, they want to dance. So I'm fostering an education that's well-rounded, but is for a performance career. But I know that nowadays they are not going to only perform. They are going to teach, they are going to waitress, they are going to do other jobs, to continue dancing. So it's my mission to let them know that this is a path, but is composed from other fields. Example, somatic work. So the work that I learned from Charlotte Adams, I apply on. Some of them go to dance medicine or dance education. Some go to the dance movement therapy. So the outcomes can be very varied. And the other, when you talk about non-majors, when I was filling out the famous paperwork for the graduate school, they asked me if I wanted to teach. And I did not know what a TA was, what a fellowship was. I did not understand. So I said, no, I want to teach. And the first year, they allowed me to teach because I wanted to create a vocabulary. I was teaching in French or in Portuguese. I did not know how to address a class in English. So Ella Shadman said, you know, you're going to teach your first year, and the second year we are going to give you a scholarship so you can develop your thesis. So that student-centered emphasis, it was definitely very welcome to me. Going back to your question, when you talk about students that are not majors, your duty is to open up these students to what they're learning there can be applicable in the world. A doctor that knows how to take care of his or her own body knows that he or she are going to be more effective in their own fields. So opening up their minds that how arts can be transformative in the community, can be transformative in the individual. And I think that those are premises that I cherish very much and I conduct in my classes.
Thank you. Well, now I'd just like to move down to Dr. Kremigis and also Dr. Lipset and talk to both of you. You came here to the University of Iowa. You got your higher degrees here, master's and PhD, Dr. Kremigis, and your PhD, Dr. Lipset, here at Iowa. And so you are well into your fields by the time you came here. And you came onto this campus with, 30-some thousand people. What do you think from the UI experience has really sort of affected you as you went through your professional career? What was it that you thought was most important about your time here at this campus? I'll start with you, Dr. Kremigis.
Well, as I indicated, when I spoke with Dr. Van Allen and he invited me to come down, I didn't quite know what to expect. And I came into a department. This was 3 years after the beginning of the space age. And there were several graduate students, including my colleague Don Garnett. And it was a terrifically exciting atmosphere because there were, the whole effort was in the discovery of new knowledge. Not very much was known about space. Every time we would design and experiment in a spacecraft to go up, you knew that you would see something that no one has ever known before, and it would be a great result. So here we were, and we would be spending, days, nights, and weekends. Typical sort of end of day would be about midnight, and then 9 o'clock the next morning we were back at work, and so the excitement of trying to discover new knowledge was palpable. And Dr. Van Allen, in my case, his teaching method was to kind of throw you overboard and see if you could swim, and then help you as you went along. And that's how I remember when he called me into his office a year and a half into my graduate career and says, how would you like to build an instrument for the first US mission to Mars? And I said, well, geez, I don't know how to do that. He says, oh, no, don't worry, you learn. And needless to say, the rest of the time I spent day and night trying to design a new instrument with a new sensor that was going to go on the first United States planetary mission to the planet Mars. And we found, of course, all kinds of new things. So that was one dimension. The other was, and several of my colleagues here have referred to the ability of expressing oneself and writing well, especially you, Mr. Kerr. And Van Allen was a masterful writer, and both in terms of his the breadth of his vocabulary as well as the austerity of his prose. And I learned a lot from him in that regard, even though having graduated from a Greek gymnasium, and I was very well versed in Greek and Latin and grammar and syntax. I do remember when I finished my master's thesis and I gave it just before Christmas, and then I went to see my folks in Minneapolis. And I came back to my little mail hall there in the mailbox in the physics department, and his secretary, Mrs. Robinson, was sitting there. He says, your thesis is in the mailbox. And so I opened the envelope, and I pulled it out, and I looked at the first few pages. And he used to write in a red pen, and it looked like he had bled over the manuscript. And I guess my blood must have disappeared. And Mrs. Robinson said, go ahead and read his note. Go ahead and read his note. So he wrote me a note, and he said, well, he says, this needs work, but it is the best master's thesis I have read in a long time. Which was, he knew how to encourage you. And needless to say, he taught me how to write scientifically and coherently, and how to communicate these ideas. And that was an invaluable experience. So I will forever cherish that in all my years. And it was a seminal experience for me to be able to practice that kind of writing over the years.
Well, one other thing I'd just like to ask you briefly about is the kind of faith you must have to have as an astronomer and someone in physics, because it's 36 or 37 years since Voyager took off, and now you're having all of this news come back and amazing things are happening, but you send something off into space, hoping that you've set it up just right so that it can tell you what you're hoping to learn, and then lo and behold, it happens, and in your lifetime, that must be pretty wonderful.
Well, it certainly is, and I think a few of us who have, of course, we didn't design it to last that long. I spoke about that this afternoon to my colleagues in the physics department. But it is a humbling experience to know that in some ways, you know, I feel it particularly so, having grown up on a Greek island with a dark sky, and I could see all the stars and wondering about the planets and so on. And now, here we are, a few of us being, if you like, representatives of humanity, sending this spacecraft outside our solar system. Yeah. It's really the kind of stuff that dreams are made of.
Yes, absolutely. So So Dr. Lipset, let me talk a little bit about child development and your work here at Iowa, because when you began to study here for your PhD, you were working in a program that was already well thought of in the country, wasn't it? A kind of a groundbreaking child development program.
Yes, the Iowa Child Welfare Research Station, as it was called at the time, it later became the Institute of Child Development, was one of the best-known child development research and teaching units in the country. And it was right here at the University of Iowa, and this was the place to get some of the very best training in child psychology of any place in the nation. It was funded by the Rockefeller family originally in 1917, and had grown to be very well known for its classic studies in child development, especially some longitudinal studies having to do with early facets of mother-child relationships and that sort of thing. A number of very famous professors had been here in the field of child development: Kurt Levine, Robert Sears, and by the time I got here, Boyd McCandless, who was a figure in child development here in this country, was the director of the child psychology program. And he and his colleagues were among the attractants for me, most notably Charles Spiker and Alfredo Castañeda, the latter being the first Chicano psychologist PhD in the country. And he was a wonderful teacher, a wonderful mentor. Eventually he left Iowa and went to the University of Texas and then the University of California. I came to Iowa after having intended to be a clinical psychologist. I did my undergraduate work at the University of Chicago, and then I went for my master's degree to the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Massachusetts, my home state. And then it seemed like I was about to be recruited into the Army, so I quickly joined the Air Force, where I thought I would have a better chance of working as a psychologist. So I actually managed that. I was taken into the largest Air Force Base hospital in the country, Lackland Air Force Base, where I went through basic training and got some of the best clinical training through that as I could possibly get. But during that time, I metamorphosed. I realized that I didn't want to be a clinician so much as I wanted to be a scientist who would try to find out how people became crazy rather than dealing with people after they became crazy. I had a friend here at the University of Iowa who was writing to me and raving about the child development program here at the University of Iowa. His name was David Palermo, and he and I were later co-authors of a textbook in child psychology. And he encouraged me to come here because this is where I could find out about developmental processes. So I was extremely lucky to have had that advice and to have come here and to have had a 3-year program with those mentors that I mentioned before, and to come into contact with experimental psychologists of great reputation and skill, including Kenneth Spence, whom I mentioned before when I was at the lectern. And there were many wonderful teachers here at Iowa and researchers. And by the time I finished my 3 years, I have to tell you this story. Boyd McCandless, the director of the Child Development Program, came through the hallway in East Hall with a paper in his hand, and he said, "Anybody want to go to Brown University?" And I said, "Maybe I do." So he handed me the paper, which was a letter inviting an applicant from Iowa to apply for the job that was then opening at Brown University, which would be in child psychology. They had had no child psychology program previously at Brown. So that was an extremely moment, the day he came through with that paper. I talked about fortuitous factors in human development before, and that was one in mind. And so I did go to Brown and have been a professor there ever since, and now am an emeritus professor at Brown, but still doing research with children. Not sure where I was going with this story.
No, thank you. But so you said that you realized that you were more inclined to study what it is that makes people go crazy than to try to help them once they've already crossed over. What do you think what have you learned in these years about that whole process of?
Say that last part again.
What have you learned in these years when you've been doing research and teaching about this whole process of what goes wrong in the mind with someone?
I have learned in the course of my career at Brown University that the training that I got at Iowa was indispensable, that I learned some of the most important scientific methodology here, and I learned some of the most important simplistic things about human development and how you go about finding out how people get to be the way they get to be. I mentioned to the gentleman to my left a little while ago that one of my teachers was Gustav Bergman, the professor of philosophy, who was also who also taught psychologists, and he wrote some beautiful works on logical positivism and scientific determinism and so on. And it so happens that Charles Spiker, one of the child developmentalists that I studied with, was said by Spence to write Bergman in English.
Yeah.
That is to say, many people found Bergman to be rather abstruse. And among the things that I learned is that antecedent-consequent relationships are amenable to study, and that people's behavior is indeed controlled by circumstances that you can indeed find the root of. And that's what the scientific process is. I remember one of the things I learned, and that I've now passed on to all of my students, is how important Ohm's law is for psychology. Ohm's law being a physics law, and the reason that it becomes so important in psychology is that everybody tends to say, oh, that's psychological and it's too complicated ever to be able to discover the roots of. The fact of the matter is that Ohm's law was devised originally with a particular kind of electrical circuit, series circuit, and does not apply exactly as it does for series circuits in parallel circuits. So that in order to understand complexities, you need to add laws to laws and to look at the complexities of interactions among various antecedents that eventually lead to complex consequences.
Wow. Well, that was sort of a perfect lead-in to our other two guests, both of whom are lawyers, have studied the law, and of course I'm speaking of you, Mr. Kerr, and you also, Paul. And I'd just love to have you reflect just a little bit on what you've heard here, anything that has been discussed so far about this whole experience of study in one's younger years, and then applying whatever, in addition to anything fortuitous that may have happened, you have also prepared yourself for your life now as a judge and looking at these complexities.
Well, let me comment on something that no education could prepare you for. I went to work at the White House one morning, and it was announced that the President of the United States was resigning. Now, we have thousands and thousands of pages of regulations in the federal government, but there's not one paragraph written on what you do when the president resigns. And so we gathered in a room, and we're basically putting together, what happened. Really, what we were talking about was how does one president leave and the other one take over the powers of the presidency, which is Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Chief Executive Officer of the country, and the head of his political party. And the scene in the White House, which this gentleman has written about, I can tell you the West Wing was not as as stable as some of his writing and television would suggest. I mean, I saw people with open bottles of Jack Daniels at 10 o'clock in the morning trying looking for guidance.
That's way better.
But in a serious sense, this had never happened before in the history of the country. And people really didn't know what it meant. We had embassies calling and wanting to know if the treaties that they had signed with the United States were still going to be in effect. There were rumors that the president really would not resign, that the troops from Fort Myer would be over to surround the White House shortly. I mean, it was just one rumor after another, and we were trying to prepare for one president to leave and another one to be inaugurated. And actually, it went very smoothly. The most difficult and emotional thing was to say was President Nixon's goodbye. He was one moment talking about his mother, the next moment he was talking about something else, and everybody in the room just wanted him to say goodbye and leave. And President Ford, who was a very Midwest next door neighbor kind of individual, but he had enormous sense of what was happening. And he stepped up and he said, "Our long national nightmare is over." And everyone there, and you could sense throughout the country, everybody just exhaled. They said, "Oh," and he took the oath of office and reestablished, I think immediately, the integrity of that office. And that's what had to be done. And it was an event, as I said, there was no game plan that had been put together about here's what you do. We were really putting together that game plan as we went along, but we all sensed the importance in the historic moment that was happening here. And so I look back to being able to integrate a lot of different issues that the people that I was working with, et cetera. And I was not a principal. I was somebody that was one of the workers. But at that moment, you have to be able to take aboard things that were coming in from all different directions and sort of integrate those things and deal with them. And but it was as I look back. I was sent up into the Black Sea once as a Navy commander, and when I arrived out of the Bosporus, the whole Soviet Black Fleet was waiting for me there, and they had aircraft coming in at us. They had helicopters hovering over us, and other ships trying to run into us. So that was another moment where you have to just be able to integrate a whole number of things and make decisions, quick decisions, and hope that what you're doing is correct. So those are just two examples where I honestly I always look back here to Iowa City, and I believe that. When I was putting lawnmowers together on an assembly line, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do. Mm-hmm. And so this became the vehicle for all of that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Paul, let me go to you. You're still young in your career. You have many, many years presumably ahead of you, and I suppose this judgeship will be something that you will. Is this a lifetime appointment or?
Yes, I have life tenure, so it's pretty solid.
Yeah.
They have to impeach me to get rid of me, which, I don't think this Congress could vote together on anything. No. So I think I'm set for a while. So yeah, actually, it's it's funny, before I got this job, I was kind of always thinking, I was an in-house lawyer. It's not common for someone to go from being an in-house lawyer to becoming a federal judge. And I was thinking, is this it? Am I going to go back to a law firm? Am I going to teach someday? But the nice thing about getting a judgeship like this is most people do this and that's it. Some people end up, going back to something else after several years. But I love the job, and I think this is, it long term.
Yeah, yeah. So, what do you love about being in this seat you're in right now?
It is, for me, it's the perfect mix of kind of the intellectual and the practical. It's all of the kind of every day there's intellectual challenge, there's hard writing and reading and really hard sort of analytical decisions you have to make about how to interpret a statute or whatever in hundreds of cases. And yet, and there's tons of writing, kind of not real academic writing, but something close to academic writing, opinions about how cases should come out. And at the same time, it's not in the abstract. It's in the context of cases that decide a big dispute between companies, disputes among people, whether someone's going to go to prison, real life decisions. And it's I just think it's fascinating. And the other thing is, unlike being a lawyer, where the frustration for me was sort of being a hired gun and trying to make the best argument you could, in every case. As a judge, in every single case, you're doing what you think is right under the law, which I think is sort of a luxury.
Yeah. Are there times when the thing you feel you have to do that's right under the law is something you'd rather not do because your emotions or your empathy with a given party would make you lean in another direction, but you still have to follow?
Yeah, yesterday I sentenced someone to 10 years in prison in a case where I thought that was way too much, but there was a statutory mandatory minimum. It was solicitation of a minor, but it was one of these situations where the age was not that far apart.
Oh, yeah.
And because it was within the statute, and Congress has set a 10-year mandatory minimum, I had to send this person to prison for 10 years. And his family's there crying. I mean, it's an extreme. Sentencing people to prison is by far the hardest thing that I think any judge will tell you they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry to say that our time has come to an end here, but I'm sure everyone joins me here in thanking you for taking the time to talk a little bit about memories of being here at the university and what this whole thing has meant to you, and sharing a little bit of your careers and your larger thoughts with us. So thank you so much, Rick Cleveland, John Falsey, Simone Ferro, Howard Kerr, Tom Kremingus, and Louis Lipsit, and then also Paul Etkin. Thank you so much. Please say thank you to our guests.